For most of history, nations measured power through territory, armies, and wealth. Then came the industrial age, when coal, oil, factories, and machines became the engines of dominance. But in the 21st century, another reality is quietly reshaping the world. The future of nations may depend on one simple question: who still has people? Not just population in numbers, but young workers, taxpayers, engineers, consumers, mothers, innovators, citizens who still believe the future is worth building. Because beneath every great civilization in history, there was always a demographic foundation. And when that foundation weakened, decline often began long before the military defeat became visible. The Roman Empire struggled with the manpower shortages in the later centuries. Europe's Black Death wiped out nearly one-third of the total population, permanently transforming the labor systems and weakening the feudal structures. And centuries later, the Soviet Union revealed another uncomfortable truth. That is, sometimes demographic decline begins before the political collapse. One of the most fascinating scholars on this subject was Immanuel Todd. Long before the Soviet Union collapsed, Todd argued that rising infant mortality, alcoholism, worsening public health, and demographic stagnation were already signaling structural decay inside the Soviet system. In other words, demographic weakness had become a warning sign of the civilization exhaustion. Today, many countries face similar anxiety. For decades, humanity feared overpopulation. Now, large parts of the world fear the opposite. Japan, South Korea, Italy, Germany, China. Many advanced societies are aging rapidly, while birth rates continue falling below the replacement levels. Schools are shutting down because there are not enough children. Villages are disappearing, and pension systems are coming under enormous pressure. For the very first time in the modern history, some nations are not asking, how do we control population growth? They are asking, how do we prevent the population collapse? Nowhere is this transformation more dramatic than in East Asia. Take, for example, Japan, one of the world's most technologically advanced societies. Yet, Japan is also one of the oldest societies in human history. Its workforce is shrinking. Its population has been declining for years. And its dependency ratio, the balance between the working age citizens and the dependents, is becoming increasingly strained. This concept is critical because population is not just about size, it is about the whole structure. A country with millions of elderly dependents and very few young workers faces a very different reality from a country with a large productive workforce. Fewer workers must sustain pensions, healthcare, and aging societies. In parts of rural Japan today, abandoned homes have become so common that some are nearly being given away. Entire schools have closed due to the lack of students. But perhaps the most haunting symbol of demographic aging in Japan is kodokushi, that is, the lonely deaths. Thousands of elderly citizens die alone each year and remain undiscovered for days or for weeks and even for months. It is not merely an economic story, it is a civilizational story. A story about aging, isolation, and urbanization, and changing family structures in modern society. Now let's take the case of South Korea. South Korea faces a similar crisis. Despite extraordinary economic success, it now has one of the lowest fertility rates ever recorded. Expensive housing, intense work culture, rising education costs, and urban pressures have dramatically altered the family patterns. The consequences are profound. Shrinking classrooms, future labor shortages, and rising anxiety about the long-term economic sustainability. China presents an even more extraordinary case. For decades, the world feared China because of its enormous population. Cheap labor powered the various factories. Factories powered the exports. Exports powered the growth. China became the manufacturing center or the hub of the world, partly because of its vast working age population. But demographics are never static. Today, China's population has begun declining. Its workforce is shrinking. Its society is aging rapidly. And many analysts believe demographics may become one of the biggest long-term constraints or challenges of China's rise. Some scholars describe this particular phenomena as China's 4-2-1 problem. One child may eventually support 2 parents and 4 grandparents. That is the long shadow of the one-child policy. And this creates a profound strategic question. Can China become rich before it becomes old? Because historically, many Western countries industrialized and became wealthy before aging significantly. China may have to manage aging while still navigating the middle income challenges. And this is why demographics are no longer merely a social issue. They are becoming geopolitics. Population shapes the economic growth, the overall military architecture, the innovation, the productivity, migration, and ultimately the national power itself. Even the military strength depends on demographic. Many advanced countries are increasingly struggling to recruit enough young soldiers. Modern warfare may involve the drones, the missiles, cybersecurity systems, and artificial intelligence. But the armies still require the human beings, young citizens willing to serve. And this is why some strategists now argue demographic decline is slowly becoming a national security challenge. The very famous geopolitical analyst Peter Zehan argues that modern globalization itself was built upon specific demographic assumptions. Large working age populations, cheap labor, stable consumption, and expanding markets. But as major economies age, many of these assumptions are beginning to weaken. Global supply chains themselves may transform because the demographic foundations beneath them are changing. And perhaps nowhere is this creating greater political tension than in Europe. Now, Europe faces a paradox. It remains wealthy and technologically advanced, but much of Europe is aging rapidly. Fertility rates remain below the replacement levels, while pensions and the healthcare burdens continue rising. This creates one of the defining questions of the 21st century. Who will sustain the aging societies when the workforce shrinks? Increasingly, many European economies rely on immigration to fill that labor shortages. But migration itself has become politically explosive, especially in countries like France or UK. Because migration is not just about economics. It also affects the identity, the culture, the religion, nationalism, and social cohesion. Across Europe, demographic anxieties are reshaping the politics dramatically. And while much of these developed world ages, another continent is moving in the opposite direction. Africa. While much of the developed world is aging, Africa is becoming dramatically younger. By the end of this century, nearly 1 out of every 3 human beings on Earth may be African. Cities such as Lagos, Kinshasa, and Nairobi are expanding at extraordinary speed and could become some of the largest urban centers in the world. This transformation may fundamentally reshape the global economy because population is not just the pressure, it is also potential. A young population means labor, consumption, entrepreneurship, innovation, and future markets. But demographics alone guarantee nothing. Without education, skill development, infrastructure, governance, healthcare, and employment opportunities, demographic energy can quickly become demographic stress. History repeatedly demonstrates this reality. Large youth populations combined with unemployment and political frustration have often generated instability. The Arab Spring revealed some of these tensions vividly. A young generation connected through technology but disconnected from opportunity. Demography alone does not create revolutions, but under certain conditions, it can intensify them dramatically. And perhaps nowhere is this demographic gamble more important than in India. India today stands at one of the most consequential demographic moments in the modern history. It has become the world's most populous country. But unlike many advanced economies, India remains relatively young. Its median age is significantly lower than that of China or Europe or Japan. Every year, millions of young Indians enter the workforce. Now, this creates extraordinary possibilities. A large labor force, expanding consumer markets, entrepreneurial energy, and strategic relevance in a world searching for alternatives to China. Economists often describe this as the phenomena of demographic dividend. But dividends are never automatic. A young population becomes an advantage only when there are productive jobs, quality education, industrial growth, healthcare, and institutional capacity. Otherwise, demographic energy can quickly become frustration, and this may become India's defining challenge in the coming decades. Because the real issue is not population size, it's about the population quality. Can India create jobs at scale? Can it educate at scale? Can it urbanize intelligently? Can it transform the human numbers into human capital? These questions become even more important because India's demographic story is not uniform. The southern states, such as Kerala or Tamil Nadu, already show fertility patterns similar to developed countries. Meanwhile, several northern states remain significantly younger. Over time, this demographic imbalance could reshape migration patterns, political representation, fiscal federalism, and economic geography within India itself. Young workers from one part of India may increasingly sustain aging regions in the other. And this brings us to one of the deepest transformations shaping the modern world, and that is urbanization. Human civilization has always revolved around cities. Rome, Constantinople, London, New York. Cities concentrate the talent, the finance, innovation, and political power. But modern urbanization is happening at extraordinary speed. Millions continue moving from villages to cities in search of opportunity. And this transformation changes societies fundamentally. Family structures evolve, traditional identities weaken, living costs rise, careers become more competitive, and gradually birth rate declines. This pattern has appeared across almost every industrialized society in the history. As countries modernize, women enter the workforce in large numbers, education levels rise, housing becomes expensive, and family sizes shrink. For centuries, large families were considered economic assets. But in highly urbanized modern economies, children increasingly become enormous financial and emotional commitments. Now, this has created a civilizational paradox. The very process that generates economic modernization often weakens the long-term population growth. Governments across the world are struggling to reverse this particular trend. Japan has introduced family incentives. South Korea has spent billions encouraging childbirth. Hungary introduced major tax benefits for the larger families. Yet, family rates in many societies remain stubbornly low. Now, this suggests something deeper than economics is changing. Modernity itself is transforming how people think about the family, the marriage, the identity, and the future. And perhaps this is why demographic decline creates not only economic anxiety, but psychological anxiety too. Because a society's birth rate often reflects something deeper than statistics. It reflects confidence. A civilization that believes in future usually reproduces itself. A civilization uncertain about the future often does not. And this psychological dimension of demography may become one of the defining themes of the 21st century. Because beneath discussions about the artificial intelligence, machine learning, military competition, cloud computing, economic rivalry, and technological supremacy lies a more fundamental question. Which societies still possess long-term demographic confidence? This is where migration becomes critically important. Migration has shaped civilizations for thousands of years. Empires expanded through migration. Economies grew through migration. Cultures transformed through migration. The United States itself became a global superpower, partly because it continuously absorbed the talent, the labor, the ambition, and the innovation from across the world. Many analysts argue that immigration remains one of the America's greatest long-term advantages over the aging rivals. Because while several major powers are shrinking demographically, the United States still retains the ability to replenish itself. But migration also generates political backlash because demographic changes also affect the language, religion, culture, and social identity. Across Europe and North America, migration debates are increasingly reshaping the politics, and this has also led to the identity politics. This reveals one of the great tensions of our century. Economically, many countries may need migrants. Politically, large sections of the society may resist them. And this tension may define the demographic politics for decades. Perhaps this is the greatest irony of modern civilization. For decades, the humanity feared population explosion, but the future may belong not to societies that simply control population, but to societies that successfully balance the population, the productivity, the stability, and the hope. Because in the end, the future world order may not simply be decided by the strongest military or the largest economy. It may be decided by something even more fundamental, and that is which nations can still transform human beings into human possibility.